Hi, everybody. My name is Kathleen Liang, and I'm going to be the facilitator for today's webinar. And we're in the process of admitting participants into our waiting room right now. So just give us maybe another 2 minutes, and then we will start this webinar. We have a very exciting program for you, and we have some very outstanding people tonight joining us, sharing their experience. This is a very, very nice opportunity. What day is today? Is today a Thursday? Yeah, in the Thursday evening that we have nothing else to do, so we're all here learning about our career path. But hopefully you will enjoy the information and be able to use it in your career trajectory. For some of you, if you have a broadband issue, it might be helpful if you turn off your video. That will help with the voice, volume, and the quality. For the speakers, we would appreciate to see you if it's convenient and if you're willing. We are not requiring people to show the video, just to give everybody a little bit of privacy. You feel comfortable in any situation that at home or in the office or anywhere you want to be. Okay, my clock says 5:32. So let's start because we have a packed program and some of our speakers have other obligations. They need to move to other events. Good evening again. My name is Kathleen Liang. Oops, too far. I'd like to introduce our AAEA Mentorship Committee. Thanks to their support and thanks to the AAEA sponsorship and assistance for us to do this career planning and advice, mentorship, all combined kind of function workshop. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to share the talking points about their experience within the AAEA organization working with master students, and also give some points to master students about how you can prepare yourself when you're doing job search, that sort of thing. Again, my name is Kathleen Liang. I am a faculty at the North Carolina A&T State University. Let's move on to our first speaker, Dr. Thilmany, who is the president of AAEA and also an outstanding faculty at Colorado State University. When we're talking, please type your questions into the chat box and we will respond to your questions after each speaker share their brief introduction. Dawn, it's all yours.
Thanks for both Kathleen offering us leadership in the mentorship space this year at AEA, and for the committee to be so ambitious this year and have so many events in a year that we all know people are looking for ways to stay connected. Thank you for that. And I was honored to be asked to actually speak at this. Sometimes I realized that we need a diverse set of voices, and I think you're going to hear from them today. And I'm just lucky to get to start off because I have to actually go and do another manners mentorship webinar here in about half an hour. So please, if I don't get your questions answered, put them in the box and I'll make sure to get back to you. I am at Colorado State University. I've been here since 1997, so I'm kind of a long timer. And I'll tell you a little bit both about our philosophy here at Colorado State with what we do, particularly at the master's level with our graduate students, but also then a little bit of how my philosophy and approach has been. So Colorado State University is somewhat unique in the fact that you really pay attention in the Intermountain West, there are not a lot of PhD programs. We have chosen to maintain our PhD program here so that there are some choices in the Intermountain West. But at the same time, I would say we have always tried to keep a very similar and strong emphasis on our master's program as well. And for our program, it was a choice based on a couple of criteria. Number one, we actually sit in kind of a regional government research hub. If you look at Fort Collins in the Colorado area, there's several USDA, Department of Interior, and natural resource agencies that sit here. And a lot of them find it is a really good fit to have students with a master's level education who in fact actually help fund some of our program, because they can often bring them into the fold and have their master's level research be part of the work that perhaps, if it goes really well, becomes their role and their title within those organizations. So that's definitely one reason. And I would say the other one is because we do think there's some unique challenges in the Intermountain West, and that it's a program where we can focus on things like water and livestock systems that are somewhat unique to this part of the world. So because that was a lot of our reasoning for keeping a strong master's program. And the other thing I would say we really emphasize is extension, and the fact that in the land grant mission of research, teaching, and extension, sometimes extension doesn't get quite the targeted attention that other functions get in professionally developing and training students. And we try to focus on that here. And it really complements that other criteria we have of knowing we're sending a lot of people to the regional government research office as well, because so often those people really have to have an ability to be able to communicate to a very diverse set of audiences what our science has to say about trade-offs and resource allocation and so forth. So then when I think about how I've tried to guide my students in mentoring them about where they want to end up and how they want to use their education, even though I'm terribly bad at it, I often think of the game of chess, and the recent movie on TV, Queen's Gambit, had me revisit that. I'm terrible at chess. My daughter could beat me starting when she was 8. But, you know, it's always that you're supposed to know what your end game is, even when you start making your first move. And I think that's very true for your graduate education, is if you know the set of things you want to be doing between now and a year and a half from now, or 2 years from now, or for those, some of you who are in your program already 6 months from now, start backing out what you're going to do every month or every semester or every quarter, or however you divide up time, and be very, very clear with your advisor. And if you don't know what those goals should be, ask your advisor, what do you think I should try to do between now and when I end? And then start really strategically scheduling for that. So again, we have our call for AAEA selected papers and a whole bunch of competitions coming up in the next 3 to 4 months. Sometimes people let those like slip by and didn't even know they should be paying attention. But again, if you have a strategy of what your end game of where you want to be visible, have people learn about your work, be known, you almost have to back out from the end date of when you plan to be done, when to get those items in your schedule. And your mentor can help you do that better if you talk to them and have an active conversation, not just about what classes you're going to take and what your thesis topic is going to be, but talk about the full set of things that you really need to have professional development skills in. And then the last thing I'll just kind of hit on in that respect is you can only manage what you measure. And again, in academia, we sometimes get narrower than we should be, and it's how many students did we teach, or how many times did we get to present our work, or how many publications we have. But think about what metrics are really going to matter for your professional life. Maybe it is how many different partnerships you work with in the projects you do, or how many producer-oriented events you get to, or if you're working in natural resources, how many different partners in the NGOs that work in that space are there, or if you have an international development interest, how you not only maybe get to go visit in country, but find ways, even in your own campus, to get exposure to other international development professionals that would give you a sense of what it's like to work with different organizations, different worlds. So think of a broader set of metrics than the traditional ones that we often count. And again, make those aware to the person either mentoring you, or if you're a mentor, think about how you coach your student after you hear them say about what they really want from their education and where they want to end up, about how they actually can track whether they're making progress to that. So with that, I'll end my comments for today. Happy to hear what other people say. I can either take questions now, or I'm happy if people want to talk in the chat box and ask me questions there to type in my responses as well.
Thank you, Dawn. There is a question, just to remind all the presenter again, keep your question short and sweet. This question is a postdoc helpful in the field of applied economics? To be precise, does a postdoc make a candidate more competitive in the job market? What do you think, Dawn? You're muted.
Shoot. When I came out of school in the 90s, it was way less common to see those, but I would say yes, and both at the PhD and the master's level, and even people who've come through my own shop, it's become increasingly common that as they find the exact right fit job for them, we have continued to give them opportunities. As many of you know, when you step into a graduate program, we don't quite have you tooled up yet to be really super active in some of the projects you kind of came with us to work on. And so a lot of times, actually about the time that you're finishing and wrapping up your education, you're just kind of getting your momentum built. So whether it's working with the same institution that you were wrapping up a degree at, or perhaps again, they exposed you to a new partnership or a new organization that they were doing a contract or cooperative agreement with, and you can have kind of it's almost like a runway into your career to be able to actually maybe get post having to be in classes and worrying about things, but not quite yet having to manage your whole portfolio of professional responsibilities that comes with your ultimate job. So I think it can make you very competitive, but be very strategic about it. And if you do particularly stay with the same organization you did your education with, clearly carve out new responsibilities you're taking on, new independence you have as a scholar, and where you're establishing the independent set of work you're doing beyond the people who have been teaching you and guiding you.
Thank you, Dawn. Let's move on to Michael. Dawn will stay with us for a while. And today's focus is on the master student mentoring, the career development. Michael has a lot of good experience working with different individuals. Michael, it's your turn. Thank you.
Did my share screen work okay, Kathleen?
Yes, very well.
So just at a high level, Dawn called herself a long timer. I'm even a longer timer. I think I got my PhD a year before she did, but I spent 14 years at Kansas State and 10 years now at the University of Minnesota. At Kansas, I've worked a lot with master's students. At Kansas State, it was very different. A lot of our master's students came out of animal science. A lot of them were our own majors. And finance, extension, Kansas Farm Management Association were key employers. And so our master's program was really targeted to help put an agribusiness or an ag economics hat on those students. In Minnesota, we're much different. We've got, in my opinion, too much math and requirements to get in our master's program. Is designed almost for doctoral students. But we do have, I've got 3 students. As I was thinking, listening to Dawn, I've had 3 students go on to work in the insurance industry. One's works in the pension office at Texas. I've got another one ran up to Malta to run a sovereign fund. Now he's back in Minneapolis here within emerging markets and Thrivent. We have a joint MBA, MS in supply chain that we have. And so I've had several students in that go through our Carlson School of Management. It's very easy to do a minor in our program. So the Humphrey Public Policy School and statistics are common minors that our graduate students are doing. So it's so I've got perspective from both of these programs, and I'll talk a bit about that. Tips is one of the assignments you asked us for is tips. First, learn how to master Microsoft Excel. Any economic concept you can do can be done in Excel. Regress, that's a great add-on feature right now. Excel's really ramped up what they've done in terms of doing some things beyond ordinary least squares. Design what I call the perfect spreadsheet. I taught farm management up until the past year. Design a spreadsheet. You may be in a job in a company for 18 months and be promoted or move laterally into something else. Other people are going to pick up your spreadsheet. So use cell references, lock cells, leave notes. Design what I call the perfect spreadsheet. So all you got to do is change your assumption columns and anyone can pick that up and watch what you did. create clean figures, be consistent, use your X and Y labels, don't use all the years on the bottom so it gets real crowded looking. But you know, like a lot of economic things, the nice thing about working in agriculture is we've got cycles. And so as part of those cycles, it's pretty easy to update things from year to year. So when you design comment boxes on graphs or add another year of data to something, the graphs can automatically replicate themselves and your comment boxes might just require a little updating. So just create very clean figures. And as part of your master's thesis, a lot of things you can do can be done in Excel. So start learning good habits as a graduate student. I don't know what you're teaching, but we teach Stata and R to our students. R is nice to have because it's open course sorting. So General Mills, for example, their employees are working with big data sets in R, and there's a whole network of people across Heinz and Kellogg's and others, you know, that within a couple hours, you can get an answer to a question if you're stuck in R with a big data set. Learn how to communicate in short paragraphs, 1 page or less. I do a lot of industry work, and just the easier you can communicate, just the better off you're going to be. It was very rare to have an internship at Kansas State. At the University of Minnesota at Urban Campus, I can often work with students to get an internship. And that helps your first year of your master's program. There's a number of companies I can reach out to. You've got to set it up. It's got to get fit within their budget. But oftentimes we can get that done. Try to get your coursework done in 2 semesters. You're not going to after 25 years, what I would say is I don't observe my students studying any harder if they take 3 versus 4 courses a semester. Get them done within your first 2 semesters if it's possible. The more time you've got to write a thesis, say 6 months, if you're on an 18-month or 15 to 18-month program, the more time you've got to work one-on-one with your advisor, the better job you'll do writing, the better job you'll do learning how to work with spreadsheets or other things, and just really, really focus on that. And last comment then, understand that for some faculty, supervising the master's student's a hassle. Talk to other faculty and students, make sure you got a faculty member who's going to mentor you and help you out. And with that, I'm going to stop. I've got to log off here at 5 o'clock to go to another function. But if you have any questions, I'll be glad to take those right now, Kathleen, if I've got time.
Yeah, we have a quick question here. Are internships also helpful in the PhD? What do you think?
So my recent doctoral student took a job with ERS, and he did a internship with ERS, and that really worked well for him. So the Economic Research Service, it used to be done through CFAIR, but maybe AAEA is doing that now. But we do have, oftentimes USDA has internships for doctoral students. I don't know the timing of your prelims, all those kind of things. Each doctoral program is different. So, but I do know that the ERS program, they do a nice job with those students, and it's a great career path for people.
Could you give some examples about the master students internship? What type of internship that you have found for your students as example?
General Mills has an active supply chain. They try to take an MS student because they've got a number of people with MS from our department, or they'll take an MBA. So in the supply chain area, they've got a nice 3-month program. Cargill's a little difficult too. I was able to have one student, I set something up with Wells Fargo to work in Michael Swanson's shop down there. Many of you may know him. Insurance companies, Thrivent, the mutual insurance company in Minneapolis, has taken a couple students. Northwestern Mutual has taken a student. So it's local firms, and we tend to try to identify a project that fits the firm's goals and fits what the student wants to do and what they're, more important, what they're capable of doing.
Anything else for Michael before he has to leave? And Don also has to leave in a minute. All right. Okay. So let's move on. The next speaker is Kelly. Hey, Kelly, would you like to introduce yourself and give us your 5 minutes introduction, please?
Sure, and that was a nice setup from Michael and Dawn. So I'm Kelly Maguire with USDA's Economic Research Service. I am the Assistant Administrator of USDA. I've been with the agency I'm the Assistant Administrator of ERS, not of USDA, of ERS. And I've been with the agency about 2.5 years. I spent about 20 years before that at the Environmental Protection Agency and the National Center for Environmental Economics. So I've done my whole career as an economist in various research and other positions within the federal government. And I'd be happy to answer questions about what it's like to have use federal service as part of your career path. It's been an extremely rewarding career for me, and definitely where I've been using my economic skills throughout. So I can talk about that. But what I'm here to talk to you today about is to just give you a sense of master's degree students and opportunities that exist within USDA and ERS specifically. And Michael and Dawn did a nice job of opening that up for me. I'll just, so I don't forget, we do hire interns, and we love interns who are master's students, bachelor's students, PhD students. We hire at all levels. Usually the call for those go out around early February. And it's something that's done through USA Jobs. So you can just kind of, poke around USA Jobs or our ERS website for those kinds of announcements. And we did have an active research or internship program this past summer, having all of our interns operating virtually. So be nice if we're in person this summer, but even if we're not, we would anticipate that there'll be lots of opportunities for students. And we hire a lot of our former interns into permanent positions as well. So just, looking here at my bullet points that I have to share with you, ERS does hire a lot of master's students. We kind of have two career paths for economists within the agency. And one is what we call research positions. And those are generally folks that have a PhD in economics, and the primary responsibilities will be to write research reports and journal articles and contribute to the state of the science around economic impacts in the agricultural sector. But we also have a career path for economists. And I would say that we're probably maybe 25%, of the master's degree career path, maybe a little closer to 30% of our positions are of that nature. We tend to call them career ladder positions. And they contribute in a variety of different ways. Really, this distinction is that those positions don't have the same research requirement that the research positions have. Many of our folks who have master's degrees do contribute and publish research reports, and that's fine, and it's contributed, but in terms of your overall job responsibilities and evaluation, it's not an expectation. It's more something that you do by choice. And so we are generally organized around three areas: food economics, markets and trade economics, and resource and rural economics. Many of our master's students work in that markets and trade economics piece of the agency, where we have a number of different congressionally mandated products that we are expected to produce. For example, we put out monthly outlook reports for about a dozen different commodities. And these are analysis that's done with very current data on quick turnaround. They're shorter reports that describe what the market is looking like for cotton, for wheat, for soybeans, for rice, for corn, and such. And they're great little reports. They're super high impact and high visibility, and they're perfect for someone with a master's degree to work on. And so we have a lot of folks who work on we call it our situation and outlook portfolio. And it's a great career path. I mean, we have people who've been doing this for 30 years. Another piece that we do is that we have some congressionally mandated work that we're required to do around what we call costs of production. And so these are usually once or at least twice a year, we put out different forecasts and estimates of the cost of production around various commodities. This is a pretty data intensive exercise that we go through. They're posted on our website. They get a lot of high visibility. And so it's another area and way in which it's a perfect kind of career job for someone with, with a master's degree in economics. And that's the expectation, is that we're going to be hiring folks at that level for these kinds of positions. But there are also a number of different positions available for folks with master's degrees in other parts of the agency. And a lot of them are around data analytic work. And so to jump forward a little bit in terms of the types of skills, I would echo exactly what Michael said. Get really good at Excel, because there's so much that can be done with it, and we use it as a basis for so much of that analytical work that we're congressionally mandated to do, and is pretty data intensive. And so there are other types of activities that we engage in, either in the environmental and resource side, using data from our Agricultural Resource Management Survey, ARMS survey, which is a huge survey that ERS and our sister agency, the National Agricultural Statistical Service, NASS, put out every year. And we hire some folks to work on a lot of the routine, we call them data products that we put out. Some of the more routine data products, whether it's around farm and household income or labor market conditions and such. Another, kind of data intensive exercise in another part of the agency, a little bit of a different subject matter than the markets and trade work I was talking about earlier, but a place where it's a great job opportunity for someone with a master's degree. Let's see, some tips that I gathered. I actually reached out to some of our recent hires and said, okay, so what would you tell these folks? The very first thing they did say to me is get really good at Excel. So I would echo that. That seems to be a little bit of a theme here. And that and some other basics, whether it's with R or some other, SCADA or SAS, having some really basic skills, even in that space, kind of gives you a leg up on other candidates, because there's so much data manipulation that you can do with some of those other tools. Excel is great, but knowing a little bit about R or SCADA or some other software package kind of gives you a little bit of a leg up. Another piece of advice they said is really to be willing and ready to be helpful. Is that they found that coming into some of these positions at ERS specifically, you sort of have to ask a lot of questions and kind of be willing to just take something on, even if you're not entirely confident about it and you're not entirely sure which direction you're going in. You kind of ask questions and ready to learn, really, because that's a lot of what happens when you're entering your career and starting off on a new job. The other piece, though, was being able to write. And so being able to, put together some kind of short report or document, knowing your audience and who you're talking to. One of the things about working in a federal position is it's very different kind of writing than for an academic audience. And so, being able to construct a memo or a briefing or a short report that kind of communicates your thoughts verbally as well as in writing is really important. And then the final piece of advice that some of our new staff gave me to pass along to you is to think about your job search in terms of looking at the position description or what's being described and not just the job title. And I would say that's especially true if you're considering federal jobs, because sometimes those titles can be opaque. So policy analyst, what the heck does that mean? It probably means a million different things depending on the agency. And you sort of have to drill down and really look at what the skills are to find out whether or not this might be something that would, be a good fit for you. All jobs through we are hiring. And so ERS, our headquarters are in Kansas City. So most of our jobs are there. We do have a few positions in DC, but primarily our jobs are in Kansas City. We're hiring. We anticipate to continue hiring. We hired 100 people last year. I don't know if we'll be able to continue that pace for the coming year, but we're definitely hiring. It's all through USA Jobs. So make that your friend. If you think that a position at ERS might be of interest to you, figure out a tiny bit of startup costs and learning USA Jobs, but it's pretty easy to navigate. So I might have gone over my 5 minutes there, so I'll stop and happy to take some questions.
Yeah, Kelly, there's a common question that usually come across very often among students is, do you require U.S. citizenship for both interns and the jobs? What's the policy?
Yes, we do. There might be a few internship programs that sometimes come through where non-citizens can apply, but otherwise you do. That is, I should have mentioned that, but that is a requirement. Definitely for the full-time jobs and the internships, you do need to be a U.S. citizen, and that's not an ERS decision. That's kind of out of our hands. And sometimes I'll get requests from people or questions that they have a green card or it's in progress. Unfortunately, we just don't have the flexibility. We have to have that citizenship in hand in order to offer folks positions. That is a concern.
Yeah. Thank you, Kelly. But Kelly will stay with us for a little bit. And then if you have other questions, just remember to type in the chat box. We will have plenty of time at the end of everybody's sharing information to come back to answer questions.
Great.
Now let's move on to our next fellow is Dr. John Dillard. And are you there, John? It's all yours.
I am. That's the first time I've ever been called doctor.
I
So,
love to call you doctor. Everybody's a doctor
well,
to me.
I
Yes. Master. Yeah.
yes. So, my name's John Dillard. I'm an attorney in Washington, D.C., and I'm not 100% sure why I'm here, but I will tell you kind of my insight. So, I guess I did get a master's. I got a master's at Purdue. Finished there 2007. I went to work for a consulting firm, which has now gone under, but not because of me, one way or the other. But I worked in agribusiness consulting, and then went from there. I'm from Virginia, and I wanted to be back closer to the East Coast. And I went to work for USDA's Economic Research Service, and as an economist. And just to kind of lay some things out, I'm not too proud to say that I didn't think I was a great economist. I went to Purdue. I did well in undergrad and enjoyed agricultural economics. Went to Purdue. I survived the program. I did not necessarily set any records in doing it. And I decided I didn't want to get a PhD. And kind of the turning point for me was, they had laid out, I figured out how to do the work eventually. But I had just zero curiosity in solving problems through economics. And I think that was an important thing for me to admit to myself, and probably the most helpful thing in my career. After getting out of Purdue, after working for a couple of years, I kind of sat back and what am I really interested in? What do I really enjoy? And I figured out it was more in the policy area. And so I started exploring different options, and for me, the option that I chose was going to law school. So that's not something that you can immediately jump to. Well, you can immediately jump to law school, but you can't immediately jump to being a lawyer from getting your MS. But that's, at the time, I think I was 26 when I started law school. No debt, no wife, no kids. And so I decided to get in up to my neck in student loans to really make sure I got the good millennial experience. So now I'm primarily a regulatory attorney. I advise companies large and small, mostly on food safety regulations, food labeling, marketing. I do a little bit of environmental litigation, so I spend some time in a courtroom. And I work with a lot of trade associations that represent the various producer groups. I practice next to no economics, and that's because I'm in the position where I'm doing something else. I realize there are better people out there to do it. So some of the things I gained from my time in getting an MS was building up a network. If we have, let's say we need an expert witness in some type of litigation to calculate damages or to calculate losses on a particular regulation, or if it's a dispute between two companies. I have a network that started at Purdue in terms of reaching out who would be a good economist to assist my clients, who would be somebody that we could bring into court if necessary. Also, everybody else has said probably one of the biggest tools that I've picked up is from getting a master's degree was being really good at Excel. I'm probably amongst everyone that's getting a master's degree, probably in the lower, one of the lower quintiles of competency, but as far as attorneys, I'll put myself up there right at the top. It is a helpful skill that a lot of folks outside of kind of the data analysis world don't have, and so that's something that does add value down the road. I think another thing that I got a little bit of a start on, and then really got a lot of experience with working at ERS that has transferred over, is writing, experience. Writing is something that doesn't come naturally to everybody, but being able to succinctly communicate information to your stakeholders is a skill that's certainly in high demand, and the only way to get good at it is to do a lot of it and have a good editor that's gonna cover you up in red ink so you can really learn some lessons there. I didn't. One thing I wish I'd spent or taken more advantage of in school, but I think have since picked up on, is taking opportunities to speak, being in front of a crowd, being an effective communicator, being able to speak on your feet is a valuable skill, no matter which way, what direction you take in your career. So I don't know where I am at 5 minutes. I didn't do a good job of seeing where I was when I started, but I think I'll leave one takeaway. I think probably the most valuable experience I had in terms of getting a master's that I've applied, down the road, was just gutting it out, just putting in the work. It was quite a shock going from undergrad to master's degree, and kind of it took me a semester or two to kind of figure it out. And I had one of the folks that was in the PhD program that's now a professor at Purdue, Todd Kesey, kind of pulled me aside and was like, "Look, man, you've just got to put in the work, button the seat, and get this done." And that's something that helped me survive my master's program. It helped me in my jobs after it, and it certainly, comparatively, law school was relatively easy, I think, compared to getting my master's. It's just understand the work ethic, what it takes to get the job done. So, if anybody has any questions.
Thank you so much, John. I'm also a Boilermaker. I think
Okay.
I stayed there 8 years for the same reason. It was not an easy ride. I graduated in 1996. When did you graduate?
2007.
Okay, so we did not overlap, but I'm
We didn't.
very proud and very honored to meet you here. I appreciate your sharing.
Yeah.
Any question for John? A quick question or so? I think it gives people a lot of things to digest for a little bit. So maybe questions will pop up.
Yeah.
Our next person that I'm happy to introduce is Michael Gunderson. Michael, you ready?
Absolutely. Thank you. So I'm Mike, and started a year ago today, I believe, with MetLife Investment Management. Before that, I'd spent 13 years as a faculty member, and have worked with master's students in all various forms now. And on the call tonight is Ailey Elmore, who was our intern this summer at MIM on the ag finance side, and mentored master's students while I was at Purdue. And so Jacqueline Holland is on the call, and mentored a lot of our MSMBA students at Purdue. And so have a lot of experience. And I would say you've heard a lot of the same advice that I would have to give. And if you were on an AAEA webinar earlier this year, it's going to sound a little redundant, but I would say you know, folks have talked already about how important communication is. And I think more so in business and in government and in industry than in academia, it's more about what you decide to tell people than, or sorry, it's more about what you decide not to tell them than what it is you decide to tell them. I mean, they just have such limited amount of time, and they're really relying on your expertise to prioritize and really share the key insights that you've got from digging through all kinds of different things. So, you know, honing that skill and really being able to distill your message down. And I think, you know, at Purdue, they have a 3-minute thesis presentation competition. And I think that's a good way to practice, to think about how you're going to distill down the work that you're doing. John said he didn't know why he was here. I invited John, and he delivered 100% on what I was expecting for. And that is, you know, you have a skill set that you're developing as a master's student that is transferable to other places. And it might not be immediately the case. So you might go out into industry thinking you're going to use the skill set you developed and move into something else. And I think good data analysis, good communication, good ability to prioritize, those are all things that are important. And in most of our master's programs, you're either writing a thesis or doing a pretty self-directed project. And I think that's the expectation when you get done with a graduate degree. You know, oftentimes I would advise our master's students that they'll be competing with undergrads for the same starting jobs, which has to be a little frustrating. You've put in another couple of years of work and now you're competing with undergrads. But I think the message that I would say is, typically, if you leverage the skill set that you've developed, you're going to move through that organization much more quickly than somebody with simply just an undergraduate degree. You're going to be well prepared to be self-motivated, to tackle problems on your own, to really build sort of a project and execute on that. And so, you know, if you do your graduate work well, you're going to be set up to really be a leader in your organization from day one, more so than, say, the undergraduates that you're competing against. So the other thing that I would mention that, you know, if you're a master's student, maybe you already realize this. As a PhD student, I was finishing my PhD sort of as social media was taking off, and LinkedIn exists, but the entire time I was a faculty member, I very rarely had a LinkedIn presence. And it wasn't until I went back to Purdue as a faculty member and the director of our MSMBA program said, you really need to be on LinkedIn just so I can send my students to you. And I think coincidentally, that's how MIM ended up finding me. But I think that's true for master's students. If you're out there building a professional network, interacting with, touch with folks, but as well to just understand what's going on in the industry and be able to have a good discussion and dialogue with folks. So, you know, LinkedIn is a great place to start a network, but you also need a real network. And I think, you know, somebody like John Dillard coming from the East Coast to the Midwest helps expand that network. And so stay in touch with your faculty, stay in touch with your students. And I think when opportunities come across to me and they ask who are good folks, of course, I'm gonna think about the students that I've mentored first. And so stay in touch with your faculty because they'll often have good industry connections that will also be able to deliver some opportunities. So glad to answer any questions that you have, but I also want to finish up early so that Jacqueline can get on here and tell us what really matters.
Thank you, Mike. I didn't realize this is our reunion of Purdue right here. How did this happen? This is something, isn't it?
Well, you guys put me in charge of inviting people, so
yeah, so that's where you started, huh? So cool, so cool. But there is a question, and as a matter of fact, I like to save this question to the end after Jackie talks, because Jackie, you probably can talk a little bit about network building since we're in the COVID-19 situation. And then we will come back to other presenters that you all can share a few points about the network in this online Zoom environment. How about that? Jackie, you go ahead.
Man, I really couldn't have had a better transition into that. My name is Jacqueline Holland. I have been a grain market analyst with the Farm Progress Group at Informa for the last year now. And to piggyback off of what Mike just said, Mike was actually the one that referred me to this job. And I am very happy with it. I absolutely love it. It's about a dream. It's basically a dream job for me. I do daily, weekly, and monthly market reports that are published on our website. I also do data analysis for corn, beans, and wheat, and I use a lot of Kelly Maguire's team's data. So thank you very much for your work, Kelly. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. But that's what I do now. I got my master's in Ag Econ at Purdue in 2014. After that, I did a year in the PhD program at Colorado State. I did not pass my econometrics qualifying exams, but it worked out fine. I went on to work in finance roles for a couple different food companies before landing this position. Yeah, I guess my career is still very short, but there have been so many different aspects that the master's program has helped me with. In terms of having flexibility and being adaptive, you just have to have that in today's workforce. Everything is changing. Technology is constantly changing. Markets are always changing. Even how we communicate changes. So, you gotta be willing to every now and then like take a step back and look at what you're doing and being like, okay, am I truly being as impactful to my stakeholders as I can be? And you just have to have real conversations with yourself about how much you're providing for the people around you. And my relationship with Mike, my mentor relationship with Mike was phenomenal for that, because I could go to Mike and I could ask him, is this a good paper? Is this not? Like, am I going down the right rabbit hole here? And he would say yes, or he would say no. And, criticism is not, criticism, I think for a lot of us that go through master's programs, we're all very, very nose to the grind, very dedicated. And criticism can be hard to take, but you really have to learn how to take that and use it to make yourself better, because that's going to make everybody around you better. And like, it's an awful realization when you think that you wrote a really good paper and then made a typo. Like, no one's perfect. So just make sure you have that grace with yourself and can keep moving yourself forward. The other thing that was just so beneficial for me in the master's program, I grew up on a dairy farm in Northwestern Illinois. My high school graduating class was 33. And, I didn't know a lot about the world. And we have so much access to the outside world with social media, but we sometimes don't always curate that to kind of go outside of our comfort zones. So, reach out to your classmates, who have different backgrounds, and pick their brains. Ask them what their life is like. Ask them what their views are on things, and just sit and listen. And you can learn so much. Let's see. Also, and this kind of comes from working in the food industry. Well, I guess just all my career. Follow good leaders. If you can identify a good leader, stick with that person. Good leaders are few and far between, especially I think in the private world. So if you can identify one of those and hitch your train to them, do it. I'd say I'd agree with everything about data literacy, and having flexibility with working with different softwares between Excel. I've used VB, I've used different proprietary softwares, I've used SAP, Stata, SAS, anything. Google and YouTube can be your best friend for that. So don't be afraid to jump into those kinds of projects. Okay, I think I've probably gone at about 5 minutes. So any questions?
Yes, Jackie, just listening to you, you brought me back 35 years ago when I started at Purdue as a master's student. What you described was so vividly true. Still, it's very, very useful. Thank you for sharing the information. There is a question for you about your econometrics. Have you used any econometrics tools in your current job?
I've used a lot of data, kind of high level data analytics. I would say I've used like less econometric modeling than I've used those skills to evaluate the integrity of data sets. Not to say that that isn't used. There are jobs out there that do that in the private world. I haven't worked with those as much. The jobs I've worked with have been more at the operations level, and a lot of it is just trying to find those one-offs in operational flaws. I think the most helpful aspect of econometrics was really kind of adhering to the rules of using good data cleaning, and those kinds of things.
You see the other question in the chat box, do you work independently or are you a part of the team?
My job right now, I work remotely. I am part of a team, but I am the only one on my team that does grade market analysis. But all of my other jobs with teams, with a lot of teams. And that's something, oh man, we could talk for days about working with teams. But I think that's one thing that you guys really have a leg up on with your master's education. You get to work with so many different people and with so many different types of personalities that you can kind of use those experiences to figure out how to work the most effectively with people when you get out into the workforce.
Thank you so much. Now let's come back to this question about network. It seems really important that we are now all in our own space, pretty isolated most of the time. So this question will be appropriate for each of the presenters. We'll start with Kelly. In the government job situation, how do you build a network since we are all in our own domain? Could you give us some concrete examples from the government positions perspective? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely challenging and we're learning. Couple suggestions that I would have. One, doing exactly what you're doing is part of building a network. And, you know, most people, myself included, you know, you can reach out to folks and just, you know, ask questions, you know, do follow up, you know, start to develop people who you think might be good mentors. You know, they might be folks who you just made a connection with, or you found something they said interesting, or their career path sounded kind of interesting. You know, you can reach out and ask questions. Another suggestion is most professional societies offer a pretty low rate for student memberships. And I would suggest joining those, you know, so it's like, you know, often it's like $20 or $25 to become a student member of, you're probably a student member of the AAEA, but for your other field societies as well, whether it's, you know, Society for Risk Analysis or Association of Environmental and Resource Economists, Society for Benefit Cost Analysis, you're hearing all of the ones that I'm a member of. join those, because right now they're doing a really good job of putting on webinars. I earlier today came from a very interesting virtual happy hour that was just kind of cool. And so this is how you start to meet and see the familiar faces and build that network in kind of a virtual way. I would also say that, I don't know if it was Michael or one of the other speakers who mentioned LinkedIn. I've used that a lot to, meet people and connect with people and kind of see what they're doing and, reaching out. So make that profile part of what's in your toolkit for your network. And I think people are being pretty creative, and you can do it in this environment.
Thank you, Kelly. Now for Mike, with the domain that you're willing to share with us, because you are obviously in a very unique situation that you were a faculty, now you're with the industry, and then you work in all different positions before. Could you share a little bit of your background and your perspective for the students who are listening here who might consider to go into PhD versus working in the industry? And then you again, within whatever domain you feel comfortable to share your perspective, give them a little bit of comparison and contrasting the differences here. Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
thank you.
I think, and I should have mentioned it at the start of my remarks. There is no better leader for the AAEA right now in this environment than Dawn Thilmany, and she is a champion of mentoring and a champion of this webinar and the things that we're doing. And she is a person that I've only ever tangentially interacted with, and she's always been a mentor to me, and so I really appreciate that. And she was talking about, you have to build a plan and you have to think about where you want to be, which is kind of crazy. I mean, there's that joke out there that adults ask kids what they want to be when they grow up to get some ideas. And I think sometimes that's sort of true. And it's intimidating for a person that's 21, 22, 23 years old to think that you've got to make a decision that's going to impact, what you're going to do 20 years from now. I think what you want to do is think more broadly with your plan, not necessarily that you want to be, a professor at Purdue. I think just generally, what kind of impact do you want to have in the world, and how are you going to best achieve that, and keeping your options open. So, the difference between academia and industry, I've already touched on it. It's the one that I think is the most important, and that is, in academia, we're willing to spend pages talking about our research project and detailing the literature and how we built our model, and none of that gets communicated in industry. Like, everybody just assumes that you get that done, and you get it done well, and you get it done correctly. And only when you do not appear to know the depth that's required do people start to dig in and really push back. And so I think in industry, and this, Kelly can comment on this, in government, you have to do that work. It's still important. You still have to do all the lit review. You still have to do all the work. You still have to figure out the methods. But when you get ready to communicate, it's got to be results first, recommendations first. Bullet points are sometimes too long. A good graphic is worth 10,000 words. And being able to tell your story quickly and succinctly is just so much more critically important in industry than it ever was for me in academia. So, but I think other than that, really, there's way more similarities than there are differences. I think when I was in academia, we had a way to have impacts and really interact with students and have an impact that way through our research, through extension programs. In industry, I have that same experience. People always ask me, do you miss teaching? Well, I miss teaching undergrads, but I don't miss teaching because I do a lot of teaching in industry. I have to help investors understand what is going on in agriculture and what do the models tell us, and where is the industry headed. And so my very best days at MIM, just like my very best days at Purdue, are teaching folks about the industry that I love. And I think if you have that passion and you let it drive you, in your master's program, you should be picking up skills that help you deliver on that passion even more effectively.
Thank you so much, Michael. Do we have any questions? That it's open discussion right now. We still have a few minutes. So I know it's not Friday happy hour time, but we can definitely make it a virtual happy hour on Thursday.
And
Let's see.
I saw the question about building networks in a COVID area.
Yes.
And I feel Kelly already pointed this out. We're preaching to the choir to some extent, because if you're on something like this, you're trying to think about, how do I build my network? Alan Gray, who is a friend and a colleague at Purdue, said that in this COVID area, he has personally found it easier to reach out to CEOs of the agribusinesses that the Center for Food and Ag Business works with, because they're at home and they have the flexibility and they're sort of interested in talking about something other than the webinar COVID employee stuff. And I think if you find somebody that you think would be a helpful mentor or an important person in your network, when you reach out to them, tell them why you're reaching out. Don't just say, hey, can I give you a call? Reach out and say, you know, I read this piece of analysis that you did, or you're interested, you're in this part of the industry and I've really paid attention to what's going on there. And I'd like to talk about this and how I could really plug that into my network as well. So a cold call email is not ideal, and you really have to personalize that message when you're doing it. And certainly don't blast a bunch of people on your LinkedIn network. You know, give them a reason to connect with you, and then ask some questions and start a dialogue. I know it'll be way harder than it would have been in an in-person AAEA meeting. Hopefully we can be in person in Austin next year, but I think you'll find a more receptive set of folks on the other side of that email than maybe we normally would.
I think that the following question would be good for both John and Jackie to help with. Since you're both new in the job market, it doesn't matter if you're a lawyer, a dentist, or a plumber, you know, it doesn't make any difference. This question is, what strategies would you like to recommend for your peers finding positions and getting one step ahead in this unusual current situation? John, you want to take a stab on it?
Sure, certainly. I think like one strong strategy is to figure out someone, identify, you know, there's all this talk about mentors, and or kind of identify somebody in the field that's doing something that you think is interesting, or something that you would like to work in that area, and find a way to get in touch with them. Before I went to law school, I'd identified my current firm as an ideal landing zone. And it took me a couple of years really to make, you know, both, you know, even after starting law school, it took me a couple of years to really make some inroads there. And I probably came close to wearing out a couple welcomes until folks listened to me. And so, you know, for me, it was identifying, okay, where do you want to end up? And then kind of identifying the areas, identifying the steps to get there. And so for me, it ended up being, you know, taking an internship with an association where one of the attorneys had worked with one of the folks that's at my current firm. I think a way to distinguish yourself is to really play to your strengths to the extent that you have them. And, you know, part of that is really identifying, okay, what are my strengths? And so certainly, you know, in terms of my approach for the job market, it was looking at, okay, from a farm background, studied agriculture in the food industry in undergrad, did this work in grad school, and then worked in industry afterwards. And so it really showed, you know, as working as an agricultural attorney, it was showing, hey, here's not something that I'm trying to fall into. And, you know, if this doesn't work out, I'll go work in some other industry. And so for me, really kind of doubling down on that background was helpful. I will say probably one of the most useful things, if you can find a way to write somewhere. I know I'm trying to think if I was, 22, 23 years old and hearing this advice, it'd be like, yeah. Like how you say that, but really finding an outlet to write on something that you're passionate about or comfortable about is a really is going to be something that is going to catch people's attention. And how do you do that? I leave that up to you. But I found for me, writing that I did it was in law school, so it wasn't in graduate school, but the writing that I did in law school actually helped to kind of catch some attention. So look at the outlets that are out there. Jackie maybe can speak to this some, but I know that in general, a lot of the farm magazines are looking for content, good content. And so if you have something you have an idea on, put it together, send it out, see what happens.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We're always looking for content that can help our farm readers to improve their operations. So I can send out my email address, and if anyone's interested, I would be more than happy to lend a hand where possible. I think for me, the biggest thing, not just with in looking for positions, especially in the pandemic, I've been very fortunate this last year. I've spent the most of it in a new role, and in the pandemic era, people are really willing to help you if you reach out. I would especially recommend leveraging your inexperience. If you say, hey, I'm new to this role, I don't really know, how everything works. Can I pick your brain about it? Everyone that I have talked to has been extremely receptive to that. We've all been where you're at. So we don't want you guys to have to go through the struggles that we have. And in terms of looking for a job, like I said, hasn't really been a concern in the last year, but really rely on your network, and keep in mind that your network doesn't just have to be your professional contacts. I have a lot of friends that I did undergrad, I did master's, even my PhD work, who have gone on to work in positions in just all various sectors of the ag industry. And the times that I have been job hunting, I've reached out to them and I have asked them what their companies are like, what positions they may have, what the company culture is like, how, what are team dynamics like, and is that something that would fit with my work style? That has probably been the most helpful thing for me in terms of job hunting than anything. And I would definitely echo everything that John, Mike, and Kelly have said too. Go look online, find companies that are interested in the same thing, that are in the space that you're interested in, and pursue that. And if you can find the hiring manager and reach out to them on LinkedIn and say, hey, can I pick your brain about this? A lot of them are really receptive to that. Everybody wants to work with good people. So if you make the effort and can show that, hiring managers, I think, are really receptive to it.
Thank you, Jackie. I don't know if you guys pay attention or not. A very nice person put an advertising about a virtual job fair. Aslihan, would you like to say a few words about it?
Sure. it's agcareers.com. They put together an all ag and food majors career fair next February. I know in the fall, a lot of schools struggled with their career fairs moving into an online platform. It was confusing to employers and the students. So agcareers.com is doing this and is open to all ag majors, all universities, and go to this website. You can register for it. I'm really excited about this opportunity for my students because fall was tough. You know, learning online, trying to find internships online, that was really rough. So hopefully by February, they will be ready for this experience. So I recommend this. And if you're looking for jobs, I'm sure they're also looking for students with both undergrad and graduate degree. And I'm gonna take credit for Jackie, former ISC grad. We prepared her Purdue, hopefully. And another ISC grad here on the audience too, so go Birds.
Now, in your experience, Liang, since you're a faculty, would you like to add anything beyond what our presenters already shared from your experience, how you work with your students and how your students evolve in the master program?
Sure, I would love to. I'm the graduate program coordinator for our Masters of Science in Agriculture. I'm at Illinois State University, Department of Agriculture. We are not a land grant university, but we are the oldest university, the public university in the state of Illinois. And our graduate program has agribusiness, ag education and leadership, and ag science sequences. You can specialize on all three areas. And for our program, it's more hands-on, more applied research. It's not as theoretical as other Master of Science in Ag Econ world. There's a little bit of difference there. We have prepared students for, private industry jobs, and some of them actually went on to, higher degree PhDs or maybe another Master of Science degree or MBA as well. One thing I would recommend doing is if you are even master's student or PhD student, try to get a teaching experience if you can. As a teaching assistant, maybe it will lead into a teaching instructor. Maybe you get lucky with that. That's really helped me. When I was at University of Kentucky, I was a TA, then I became an instructor for food marketing class, and then advanced microeconomics class, small classroom, large classroom experiences. I taught myself how to teach online using WebCT at the time. And we had different, learning management systems since then. So I'm always learning these new LMS systems and how to use technology tools to teach students and engage them. So invest your time in those webinars. I attended millions of webinars since March, and actually myself offered workshops to faculty here on how to use technology tools to engage students. So if you can get any kind of teaching experience, that might lead to a career in non-land grant environment, mostly teaching, but still with research expectations as well. So that will be my recommendation. And I'll be happy to answer questions if you have about that.
Cool, thank you.
Sure.
I'm glad there are faculty members here, so we can definitely learn from other schools. Are there other faculty members or other industry representatives here on this call that you'd like to share a few things from your perspective? Just put your willingness to speak in the chat box. That would be great. Any other questions or comments? Now, we will do an activity at the end of this opportunity because this is we have people passionate about helping others. We have people in different stages of a career sharing their experience. If you can type brief comments in the chat box to give us a feedback of what exactly you learned, first of all, and how you would like AAEA to continue to provide the support to master's students for any particular things, please type your feedback in the chat box, and then we will collect your information. On behalf of the mentorship committee, our purpose is to provide a service and to create a broader impact for all ages, all career paths, all majors related to agriculture and applied economics domain. So your input will be very helpful for us to create a future programs, new exciting opportunities to interact with the individual and to interact with the group. So I'm taking this opportunity to pick your brain because our committee members, we are very limited in the way we think, how we think it should be done. So it's much better to go out to the stakeholders like you and give us some feedback and the input of what you would like to see us doing it. Like Michael said, Don Thilmany has been a fantastic president, helping the mentorship committee to really broaden our outreach. I've known Don since we were both grad students, so we've known each other for 30 years. And that's been a long, long career that we built together in AAEA. I am very confident to say this. I started with AAEA in 1989. Many of you weren't even born yet. You're a dust in the stars among the sky. But that's how I started with AAEA. That's when I was a master's student at Purdue. And my whole career is built upon AAEA encouragement, mentorship. Most of my mentors are not from Purdue. Because of AAEA, I was able to become acquainted with a lot of faculty members, my peers. Like I said, many of my colleagues that I'm collaborating today, it was a student that I met somewhere in time in AAEA. And these are very valuable experiences. When you need somebody to write grants together, when you need somebody to call to complain about your colleague, but not trying to violate any confidentiality issues, you have somebody you can trust and to share the information and to learn from each other. So again, before we close today, we'd like to gather your feedback. There's still questions here. Somebody, you are all introducing yourself. That's fantastic. And then, how you like to continue the engagement with us. Somebody asks about the newsletter publishing intern job posting information, and somebody talk about different experiences. The presenter's email, if I have your permission, then we will send out the presenter information to the participants. And the AAEA Allison here is doing a fantastic job to monitor the flow of the discussion. So we will make sure that the participants of today's web meeting will receive the email information from the presenters. So if you don't have any burning questions, we want to thank you for your participation and a big thank you to all the presenters. We appreciate you staying here for